Good evening, friends, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministries Community Conversation. It is wonderful to be here with you this evening, and I'd like to, I'm Reverend Margaret Earl, and I'm the Executive Director and Senior Minister of the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry, and I'm delighted to introduce you to my colleague, Monique Veale.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I am the Director of Special Projects at the Urban Ministry, and I have the pleasure of working with Margaret every day. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Monique. So for those of you who are new to the work of the Urban Ministry, we are located in John Eliot Square in Roxbury on a historic campus that's best known to our neighbors as First Church Roxbury. The three things that the Urban Ministry currently does to advance racial, economic, and social justice are services and programs for survivors of domestic violence, including a shelter and a workforce development program. We have after-school programming for high school students, and we train some of those young people to be tour guides to lead historic walking tours of our campus and neighborhood. And we also do what we broadly call community engagement, which are all the ways that we seek to build relationships across communities and raise issues that are of particular importance in Roxbury, such as these community conversations. Monique, could you tell folks more about this series?
Absolutely, thank you. So our community conversations highlight the history and the art and experiences of Black and Indigenous people of color. These conversations also provide an opportunity for us to raise awareness around some of the issues that plague the residents of Boston in our neighborhoods that are surrounding the urban ministries. These conversations also provide information on how to support the ongoing work that these organizations are doing to help people of color. Margaret, can you believe it has been a full year since we started these conversations?
No, I cannot.
I can't. It has gone by so quickly. And tonight actually concludes our community conversations for this season. However, it's our hope to continue these conversations in the coming year, hopefully both in person and virtually. So please stay connected with us to find out more about our upcoming conversations. And lastly, thank you for joining us this evening as we talk about facing yesterday to face tomorrow and today with Mr. Byron Rushing. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this evening, we're going to start as we have done so during this past year, which is to first share with you what we call a commitment minute. And one important thing to note about the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry is that we have approximately 50 Unitarian Universalist member congregations around Greater Boston who are connected to us and our work. And to an extent, they see us as a way to live into their social justice commitments to make a better world. And so each month, each time we've had a community conversation, we've had a member congregation help sponsor these. And tonight, we're so pleased that First Parish Milton has sponsored this evening, and we have a message from Reverend Lisa Ward of First Parish Milton. Here's our commitment minute.
Good evening. What an honor it is to help sponsor this evening's community conversation with historian Byron Rushing, civic servant and champion for justice. Justice, Cornell West reminds us, is what love looks like in public. The Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry has been practicing this love deeply and widely for years, finding courageous, creative, and transformative ways to work in and with the Roxbury community as true partners facing yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I'm Reverend Lisa Ward. I have the honor of serving First Parish in Milton Unitarian Universalist. First Parish in Milton has been a part of the Urban Ministry's wider community for many years and has benefited greatly in service opportunities throughout those years. We are proud to be in solidarity with the Urban Ministry's mission to work across race and place, to dismantle racism and white supremacy culture, and to advance racial, economic, and social justice. This is an endeavor that takes many varied forms of advocacy and commitment, individually, congregationally, and in the wider network of service and civic organizations. The UU Urban Ministry is a vibrant conduit and model for the important, transformative, and life-giving work of justice. So thank you for attending this evening and for all that you do for the Urban Ministry.
Thank you to my good and dear colleague, Reverend Lisa Ward, and to our good congregation, First Parish in Milton. Next, we would like to share with you a reflection, a compilation on some of the commercials that we've made through this past year. In our work to advance racial, economic, and social justice, we have striven to raise and lift up some of the Black-owned businesses in Nubian Square and near Nubian Square. And each month we've been joyful to share those wonderful restaurants, gyms, clothing stores, all the wonderful businesses that are just down the street from the Urban Ministry. And so today we want to give you a little snapshot of those commercials from this past year. So you're going to see a little collection of them. Here are our commercials.
Hi, my name is Tamika and welcome to Suya Joint. Our location here in Boston is 185 Dudley Street in Roxbury. Involve ourselves in the community in any way, shape, or form that we can. Partnering with World Central Kitchen, we do offer gift certificates. You can buy that here or online.
Welcome to Haley House. My name is Misha. Come on in. So you can visit us at 12 Dade Street, right in the heart of Nubian Square. Find gift cards, retail products, and ground coffee right online. And we also do delivery.
Final touch with class.
My wife just says I got an idea. Hey, what about a boutique accessory store?
Haris, our son, who is really the one who does all of the very fashionable windows.
Now, if you'll follow me this way, I can show you more. I love this. This color is called fawn. This is another vegan leather. www.finaltouchwithclass.com. So please come join us.
Hello, my name is Chef Cheryl. I own Soleil Restaurant. We are located at 2306 Washington Street in the heart of Nubian Square. And Soleil is named after my granddaughter. And in French, Soleil is the term that is used for the sun. Southern with a twist. And our collard greens, I used smoked paprika. We are open Monday through Friday.
Welcome to Frugal Bookstore in famous Nubian Square. My name is Leonard Egerton. I'm one of the owners along with my wife Clarissa.
Hi everyone, my name is Clarissa Cropper Egerton and I am one of the co-owners of Frugal Bookstore. Welcome. Sure. So right now we have our children's corner, hardcover children's books, our toddler section. So we have a bunch of board books, our children's Latinx section. Over here we have our nonfiction section. We have autobiography sections against the wall here. We have history section. In the front we have like current events. We have sports biography, music biography. We also carry Bibles.
And Qurans.
And Qurans.
To order online, all you have to do is just go to frugalbookstore.net. The mission of Frugal Bookstore is to change minds one book at a time and to increase the literacy in our community. You missed it. No. You missed it. I'm a star.
It's really fun to look back at all those wonderful commercials that were produced by our Social Justice Fellow for the Arts and Humanities, Bithia Israel. And now is the main event. It is our joy and our pleasure to introduce historian Byron Rushing this evening. And I do want to note that Historian Byron Rushing was the inaugural presenter of our community conversations when we started them, and we very intentionally wanted to invite him back to close this out for this season. Byron Rushing is an historian and former state representative. He was born in New York City, and he's lived in Boston since 1964. During the 1960s, he was active in the civil rights movement, working for the Congress of Racial Equality in Syracuse, New York, and as a community organizer for the Northern Student Movement of Boston. He directed a group of organizers, Roxbury Associates, who helped to found the Lower Roxbury Community Corporation, now Madison Park Community Development, which was one of the first CDCs in the nation, and who began some of the earliest organizing in a Black community against the war in Vietnam. Byron is a deeply knowledgeable historian, and from 1972 to 1975, he was president of the Museum of Afro-American History. Under his direction, the Museum of Afro-American History purchased and began the restoration of the African Meeting House, the oldest extant Black church building in the United States. In 1979, Byron oversaw the lobbying effort in Congress to establish the Boston African American National Historic Site, a component of the National Park Service. He led the museum in the study of the history of Roxbury. As a legislator, he sponsored the creation of Roxbury Heritage State Park.
First elected in 1982, Byron served 36 years in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. In his last years, he was the appointed House Majority Whip. Byron's priorities in the legislature were human and civil rights and the development of democracy, local human, economic, and housing development, and housing and health care for all. Byron was an original sponsor of the Gay Rights Bill, the chief sponsor of the law to end discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation in public schools. He was one of the leaders in the Constitutional Convention to maintain same-sex marriage in Massachusetts. He successfully co-sponsored the Transgender Civil Rights Bill. He fought for the rights of those who are homeless, fought for victims of violence, and for those struggling with addiction, and fought against the reestablishment of the death penalty. As an active Episcopalian, Byron has been a long time elected lay deputy to its General Convention. In 2015, he has served as vice president of its House of Deputies, the highest elected position by a layperson in the Episcopal Church. During all his time in Boston, Byron has worked for and with community-based organizations for greater political participation against neighborhood debilitation. He continues to serve the community with an understanding of poor and working class people, and with a belief in democratic citizen control. He is also a past board member of the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry and currently serves on the Roxbury Historical Society. Please join us in welcoming Mr. Byron Rushing this evening.
Welcome, Byron.
So good to be here.
Good to have you here. Thank you so much for being with us on this rainy evening. So, Byron, yeah.
Yep. Can you see me okay and hear me okay?
We can see you perfectly. Yes.
Great.
Yes.
All right.
Perfect.
We're in business. Yes.
All right. So I want to kick us off a bit on tonight's topic. So tonight's topic is on the importance of looking back in order to look ahead. As we all know, we're at a very particular moment in time as we're emerging from the pandemic, when we're trying to look ahead, and the decisions that we make right now for our future are very important. In this moment in time, I wondered, can you give a sense, Byron, of whether you think that history can be a resource for the work now, and if so, how so?
So I want to start with sort of a definition of it. What are we talking about when we talk about history? In the days when I was at the Museum of Afro-American History, we would always, no matter what exhibit we were doing, we would always have an opening label that said words like these. For us, history means people and events through time. We do not know where we are if we cannot remember where we have been. We can't make informed decisions about where to go if we can't recognize where we are and where we have been. History is time. People in time, past, present, and future. And I think that when we talk about people in the past, when we talk about history as past, it is only part of the story. And so we also, and we of course make decisions about what we think about in the past based on where we are right now. And we need to, at the same time, understand that we are also, even sometimes unconsciously, always thinking about the present and the future when we're thinking about the past. When I used to introduce history to young people, and I found that it was always a lot easier to talk to young people about history than to talk to adults about history, because they had less prejudices about the past. From their point of view, they were always learning something. And I would have them engage in an exercise, kind of role playing. And I would ask them if they had a word for no memory, if they had a word for not being able to remember anything. And in the 70s and 80s, they would always say amnesia, right? Now, of course, you ask them, they say Alzheimer's, right? And when we worked on that, I would say, okay, now I want you to have it. I want you to have amnesia. I'm going to clap my hand and you're going to forget everything. And they got into it almost immediately. And then I would start asking them questions like, where are you? And almost immediately they understood that they didn't know where they were if they had no memory. Because it was memory that told them that they were asked by their teacher to come into this classroom and have this discussion. And if they didn't remember that, they wouldn't remember why, and maybe not even where they were. And then, of course, I would tell them, hey, I haven't lost my memory. You've lost your memory, but I didn't do it. And they, of course, would start asking me questions. And when they asked me questions, where were they? Other kinds of questions, I made sure that I did not tell them the truth. And of course, immediately they figured that one out. And they realized that, of course, if they had no memory, they could be lied to and think it was the truth. So when we talk about memory and history as corporate memory, we have to be careful about what we are hearing, what we are learning, and we have to question all of it to understand that we are hearing the truth. Because if we don't hear the truth, then we have no way of making accurate predictions and accurate decisions about what we should do, what our future should be, what the future we should recommend people should have. So it is that kind of combination that I think in this discussion we should start off with. You know, we all know the phrase from William Faulkner. You know, the past is never dead; it's not even past, right? And for us, when we think about history, we're talking about the history that is alive, right? The history that is not past and gone is alive. Now, it's that piece of truth is really hard because because the definitions, what we learn that is supposed to be historical, of course, is influenced by our own prejudices, influenced by the ideologies of the people who are writing the books, right? Mm-hmm. And that then is a real task that we have to sort of undo that. Mm-hmm. And so I think everybody listening to this conversation and soon to engage in it, we all think that we want this society to be better. And I would be surprised if we don't have, if we have anybody on this conversation who think that having this society be better means that we all have to figure out ways of going forward together. We have to figure out ways of doing that in some fashion that doesn't continue to divide us, but actually brings us more and more together. But if you look at most of what is written about the history of this country, of course, we are reading a history that was written by people who didn't believe that. See, most of the people who have written this history did not believe that. See, most of the people who have written what we call American history was written by people who had very strong ideas about what they, as Europeans, considered the proper role for them and the proper role for other people. And so the history about the other people does not get told like the history of people in control. A friend of mine says that there are two kinds of history in the history when you talk about the history of the United States. And it is the history from the ship and the history from the shore. Mm-hmm. And we have written the history from the ship, the ships of the Europeans who came here for their imperial reasons, right? But not from the history, from the point of view of the history who watched those people arrive, right? And if we are going to include everybody going forward, we have to tell both of those histories, right? And when we talk about our society, we are talking about a society that, of course, first inhabitants were the people who had been here for 10,000 plus years, the Native Americans. And they were the people who greeted those first Europeans. Now, we have a complicated history because we have another history from a ship. And that's the history of the people that the Europeans stole and brought the Africans. And so our fundamental origin story is not the story of white people. It is the story of white people, Native Americans, and Black people, right? Or as they used to, because the people in charge liked short words and liked to define everybody by color for some weird reason: white people, red people, and Black people. Mm-hmm. And when we read the books, when we read our textbooks, if we did it based on how long you're here, right, 90 pages should be about Native Americans and 10 pages about Europeans and Africans, right? I haven't seen that book yet.
No. So I know that there was, so with that context, and maybe we want to get to where we are and sort of emerging from the pandemic in a little bit, but I wanted to sort of go back to something that you referred to when you talked about telling the young people that unless you know some of the truth of history, then you don't really know where you are. And sort of listening to this context of who's written the history, who's gotten to tell the history. And so therefore, what has been true or not true. Can you give examples of ways that history has not told, commonly held history has not told the truth? And some specific examples of how that has failed to help us understand where we really are, because we have not heard some truth. Can you give a couple of examples of that, Byron?
Well, yes, and I guess, and this might be, I hope you said a good thing, and that is this was a theoretical introduction, and now let's get down to Boston and Massachusetts, right?
Okay, it's good context.
So one of the things, of course, we've all been told is that the Europeans came here because things were that there were ideological problems they were having at home. That they came here because one of the great myths is they came here for freedom of religion, and what is so interesting about reading and about the reasons why the first English came to Massachusetts in large numbers was, of course, they certainly were having an argument around religion in England, but they were also having an argument about politics, and they brought both of those pieces with them here to develop a community, a set of communities here. But they also were concerned about economics. I once actually gave a talk at First Church, and afterwards, about a week later, I got in the mail a wonderful cartoon by one of the people who were in the audience, and the cartoon had these two pilgrimy-looking people on a ship looking off, onto the horizon, and one says to the other, "Yeah, I understand this thing about freedom religion, but I'm really here for real estate development." And this whole thing about coming here for economic reasons gets little and not enough, of course, play. And then, of course, the understanding of what religious freedom meant. Of course, for the Puritans, religious freedom meant freedom for themselves, but not for anybody else. And so, the two statues of women in front of the State House, one was hanged and the other was banished by the Puritans, and because of their religions, and so to understand the idea of settler colonialism, we have to talk about that part of the reasons for why Europeans, once they heard about this place, found it to be such an advantageous place. And of course, because of the economic potential of this place, they realized something else, which we have a hard time even now believing, and that is most white people in the world want to come here, right? And of course, that was not true. And most English didn't, although tons of them came, most of them didn't want to come here, and they quickly understood they didn't have enough people to exploit the country and the resources that they found here, and therefore had to find a cheap way of increasing the amount of labor they had for that exploitation. And that, of course, is the source of African slavery.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that, that example. Thank you.
Thank you. So I could listen to you just talk all night long. I don't even know if I have questions, but there's such a wealth of knowledge in there. But just thinking about the past year, Mr. Byron, and all that has transpired, all that we've been through, you mentioned something about history being time and, you know, kind of rewriting history. And as I think about the Black Lives Matter movement and how it has different meanings and different manifestations for various people, can you talk a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement and why some of us are thinking about moving away from having or acknowledging Black History Month and focusing more on Black futures? And what are your thoughts about what that means for us as we think about where we've been and where we're trying to get to and what we want to accomplish?
I think that that is a brilliant question. And I think that I think we all have to be very careful about analyzing what has happened over the past, well, many of us thought it was going to be a year, but 15 months now, right? We have to be careful about our analysis because we don't know yet what it all means. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's very important that we sort of wait and see, be open to what we are going to see in following this incredible year that we've just been through. But right at the beginning of this year, there were people as we know, talking about in the Black community, talking about the fact that we were not being realistic about how slow our progress was in this country. And they tended to be young people and who felt that somehow they had not been prepared for these times by us, by older Black people. Mm-hmm. And so they began to be taking hard looks at problems in the Black community that were clearly not being solved and didn't look like they were going to be solved soon. And then we and they, in all of that, were in a kind of argument with other Black people, and clearly in an argument with white people, and a very big argument with white liberals, right? And so they had begun to redefine how we look at race in this country. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we are hit by this incredible, unexpected, nobody could predict, right, virus. We could only look back and say there were people who were telling us something like this was going to happen, and we ignored them. But there it was. And then we have May 25th last year, right? And we have the murder of George Floyd. And then the virus did not matter. It was too important to let that not be responded to by the whole community. And what was remarkable, of course, is how many people in the background were also saying, whoops, I should have been out earlier around other issues, but I will not have this one pass. Mm-hmm. Right? It is, and it was for me, a movement that I was comfortable being a follower of. And I think many of us were. It obviously hasn't ended, but it has had a profound effect on our society. And it's very important to always understand that in movements like that, there are always people who do not agree. Always people, and because of the president that we ended up having in this country, they were invigorated, right? They were not silent. And so we had a time where both those who wanted a new America and those who wanted an old America were both yelling at the same time. And that is the time that we are now moving into. And on one hand, I am looking forward to the leadership of the Black Lives Matter movement and some of their allies and going forward and seeing where that goes. I do not know where that's going to go, except all the pieces seem right if it continues. But I'm also, of course, as we all are, very concerned with the right wing, with the white supremacists, right? Organizations in this country who now feel, right, that they are empowered in a way that they didn't feel 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be prepared for that. In many ways, you know, we have not been prepared in the past for the opposition. You know, in my generation, we really believed that when you won battles, you also convinced the people who you were battling. And now I think we know more and more that you may win battles, but the people who got outvoted did not get converted. Mm. And of course, we are seeing that right now in this country, and we'll see more of that. And so the importance of both following the ideas and strategies that are coming out of the Black Lives Matter movement are important, but our support for that is really crucial. Right?
Can I ask, Byron, you know, you talked about kind of still seeing how things are going to move and unfold, and what has transpired after the death of George Floyd in the last year. Should we, you know, I think there is a way to look at what has transpired as there has been more awakening, there's been more facing things, there's been more institutional recognition of the failures to be equitable, to be inclusive. And you're also talking about being prepared for pushback. And I wonder, can you speak to, do you think we should find hope in this moment? Or do you feel hopeful as you look ahead, or not?
Well, yeah, hope is an interesting concept, and so, you know, there is the hope that we have as Christians, right? And so, of course, I'm hopeful, but there's also a political hope, right? And that political hope for me means that I believe that right now we're going to continue this work, and that there will be a significant number of people, both Black and white, and growing amounts of Native Americans and Asians engaged in this work. That we will not see compromise as part of the strategy for a while. And one of the things, and think about this, you know, on one hand, we have made very, very considered case for police reform in this country. But we have to be very conscious of how little of that has happened. And so we can't feel that the few moments, a few pieces of legislation around police reform are in any way enough, that has satisfied what we need to have in our communities, where we can be safe because we are all cooperating in the safety of our community, and have no one pretending to be providing safety who are not. Right? And so I am hopeful in a political sense that we will maintain the kind of activity of both voting and on the street activity that is necessary to accomplish those goals, but that we won't stop until those goals are accomplished. If we look at the ideas that have been raised in the streets over the past 2 years, it is quite remarkable how radical they are, and what a difference we are asking our society to be, and so we have to maintain the support for those ideas. There are a lot of people, right, who don't want those shifts in our society, and we have to make sure that they are always called out, that we always name them, and that's and for us, of course, they might be mostly Black, they might be mostly white people, but they're not only white people. And we have to be very careful of who we support inside the Black community, that make sure that they are working toward those same ideas and are not, into ideas that are not going to be transformative in our society. That actually gets me to something that Monique asked me in the first part of her question, and that is, what about thinking about the future? See, how do we think about the future? And Monique is absolutely right. There are people right now, and I'm on the verge of joining them, who think next February we should abolish Black History Month, or we should make Black History Month only celebrated by white people, right? And then Black people, we need to be talking about Black Futures Month. We need to figure out ways of systematically talking about the future. And we don't really do a lot of that. We talk about immediate things getting better, that we need more affordable housing. But what would it look like if that was never a question? What would it look like if housing was a right? If housing was as available to us, right, as being able to drive down the street? If housing was available to all of us, period, that's it. You wake up, you wake up, and you do not have to worry about whether you can afford where you live. Everybody. See, what would that look like? And we need to spend more time, I think, being conscious about what that would look like. It's interesting. People say they don't want racism in the United States. But what would it look like if we had no racism? What would it look like? What would we call each other if we had no racism? There would be, I give this speech a lot, and so, and when I say give this speech to Black people, I say, and there will be no white people, and everybody smiles if there was no racism there. But then I say, there would be no Black people, because we are only defined in this incredible word that includes everybody in the world of African descent as Black. The only reason we are defined by that incredible word is because of racism. Right? Now, how are we going to talk to each other? What will be the language in a society that was not racist? How would we act in a society where there was no white supremacy? Okay? And I think that those kind of what seem at first theoretical kinds of questions are really essential questions for defining a strategy toward getting there. You see, we have to know when we're getting closer to it. We have to know when we have gotten pieces of it. And we can only do that by seriously discussing, sitting and talking and reading about what that kind of society would look like.
Thank you.
So I'm all for Black Futures Month.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that.
And the more we can get, I hope I am so tired of white people finding out something about Black history and saying, "Oh, I never knew that." So I want them to all go away. So when the next time I talk to them, they don't have to say that.
I'll remember that, Byron. I will not. Be very careful.
I mean, we all learn from about history that we did not know, and that's the way it should be. I don't know how many people here are watching the documentary High on the Hog, and I had to call up my daughter and said, who had lived in Nigeria, I had to call up my daughter and said, I didn't know that. and she bawled me out.
Well, I think I have one other question for you, if you don't mind. This one. So I'm thinking about our audience that we have present, which includes folks from the suburbs, some of our UU congregations and our neighbors in Roxbury, and I'm sure a few others. You know that the goal of the Urban Ministry is to always find ways to bring people together, to work for justice. And not that we do it all the time perfectly, but we're willing to push ourselves a little bit and get connected with the right people. What words of exhortation do you have for us to live into our new mission and our work for racial, economic, and social justice? And how can the people in our audience and our congregation and partners help us to do that work?
You have a set of these deep questions, Monique.
Feel free to take it apart. So basically, what can we all do to keep this work going?
I hear you. So I really believe that it's essential that everybody who is concerned about change in this society, especially the change when it involves the whole history of supremacy on white people's part, the whole history of a range of oppression and discrimination against people of color, but also other people that are white, the oppression and discrimination against poor people in this country, that we decide that work has to be work that we do every day and has to be something that's always in front of our minds. I always say to white people that they should always, no matter how many meetings they go to, no matter what places they're in, they should always count the colored people in the room. When you go to church, don't leave without counting the colored people in the room. The next time you go shopping, make sure you've counted the colored people who are shopping with you. Right? Get a sense of how segregated this society is. And Black people do that all the time. I can remember going to a speak at a Chamber of Commerce meeting once, and when I got up to the podium, there were all these spotlights and everything, and I couldn't see a person in the room. And on my way out, I saw this Black guy at a table, and I said, "How many Black people are here?" He said, 7. See, he had already counted them. And Black people do that all the time, right? I always know how many Black people in the other room with me, right? And how many times do white people do that? And you got to do that. You got to do that. There's no person of color who gets through the day without mentioning white people. You can't do it. You can't talk about the society and not talking and have some reference, right? Funny, right? Sad, angry about white people. Right? White people don't talk about us at all. The average white person in the United States gets up in the morning and before they get to work, never see a Black person. Can you imagine that for a Black person? Wouldn't that be something? We'd be able to get to work and never see a white person. Right? That's how segregated this place is, unless they're rich and they see servants coming to work. Right? And so when in my youth, when I was a civil rights worker, all my organizations always sent me to fundraisers. So I used to have to go and talk about why people should give money to civil rights groups. And interestingly, I ran into another guy who had the same job for SNCC. And that was Stokely Carmichael. There was something about they thought that we had an ability to talk to white people, and so we both wound up at this snazzy apartment on Memorial Drive. He was raising money for SNCC. I was raising money for NSM, and then of course the white people stood up and gave it and asked us all these dumb questions. So the question I got asked was, both of my parents white? Both of my parents Black? Do I have one white parent? That was great, and you get really annoyed at this. And then once a white woman stood up and said she lived in this very snazzy suburb and stuff, and there were no Black people, and she never went to school with Black people, and there were no Black people for her kids to go to in their school. What should she do? And Stokely didn't miss a beat. And he said, pay your maid a living wage. So I start there, right? If you are not giving money to Black people, right, then there is something wrong. If you are not buying from Black people, there's something wrong, right? And so I think that it is essential that white people really wake up in the morning and say, I am waking up into a racist society. And from the time I'm awake, I'm going to think about that. Because there is no Black person in this country who doesn't wake up and say, somehow in their head, I am walking out into a racist society. Right? And I think we all have to wake up and walk out that conscious.
Thank you, Byron. And when Monique asked you to exhort us, you did, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate that.
I do what I'm told.
Thank you so much.
But I think that's a great segue, because we're going to have some Q&A, but we want to show our compilation of commercials. And to your point, Byron, about supporting Black-owned business to ensure that where are you putting your dollars? I think this is lifting that issue up again. So I really invite our audience to stay with us. We'll have some time to do some questions and answers with Byron Rushing. But I'm also going to ask you to try to note the businesses that are being featured here and think about how you can support them and invest in them. So we're going to take this commercial break. We'll come back and have a little bit of time to ask Byron Rushing your questions. So thank you. Sit tight.
Hi, my name is Tamika and welcome to Suya Joint. Our location here in Boston is 185 Dudley Street in Roxbury. Involve ourselves in the community in any way, shape, or form that we can. Partnering with World Central Kitchen, we do offer gift certificates. You can buy that here or online.
Welcome to Haley House. My name is Misha. Come on in. So you can visit us at 12 Dade Street, right in the heart of Nubian Square. Find gift cards, retail products, and ground coffee right online. We also do delivery.
Final touch with class.
My wife just says I got an idea. Hey, what about a boutique accessory store?
Haris, our son, who is really the one who does all of the very fashionable windows.
Now, if you'll follow me this way, I can show you more. I love this. This color is called fawn. This is another vegan leather. www.finaltouchwithclass.com. So please come join us.
Hello, my name is Chef Cheryl. I own Soleil Restaurant. We are located at 2306 Washington Street in the heart of Nubian Square. And Soleil is named after my granddaughter. And in French, Soleil is the term that is used for the sun. Southern with a twist. And our collard greens, I used smoked paprika. We are open Monday through Friday.
Welcome to Frugal Bookstore in famous Nubian Square. My name is Leonard Egerton. I'm one of the owners along with my wife Clarissa.
Hi everyone, my name is Clarissa Cropper Egerton and I am one of the co-owners of Frugal Bookstore. Welcome. Sure. So right now we have our children's corner, hardcover children's books, our toddler section. So we have a bunch of board books, our children's Latinx section. Over here we have our nonfiction section. We have autobiography sections against the wall here. We have history section. In the front we have like current events. We have sports biography, music biography. We also carry Bibles.
And Qurans. To order online, all you have to do is just go to frugalbookstore.net. The mission of Frugal Bookstore is to change minds one book at a time and to increase the literacy in our community. You missed it. No. You missed it. I'm a star.
All right. So we are coming back to some questions and accolades. I think we have a number of accolades first. So Monique and I are I'm gonna read the first comment here in the question and answer box from Dave Harrington, who writes, a wonderful presentation. This is to Byron. You always expand the way that I think about life in our world. The notion of thinking about Black futures is clearly important. How do we help very young people, perhaps primary school children, embrace that perspective?
Yeah, I don't have a detailed answer to that, but I do have a general answer to that. And I think, you know this about all young people. They sure listen to how adults talk to other adults. And I think that we really need to get this to be on our agenda, that's how we talk, that we ask that question, what would it be like if this place were positively different? And I think and we need to talk to each other about this, and that will have a significant influence on young people. Then of course you have to bite the bullet and go talk to the schools, and that has to happen also. There's some people who are more organized and better at doing that work of changing curricula in the schools, but that definitely needs to happen. But I do believe that how we shift in our conversation, in what we ask questions about in our daily lives with each other, has a profound effect.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I will read some of the comments. This one is actually from Kristen Belton Willis, actually. Kristen Belton Willis. My mom, Erlene Belton.
Oh, yes.
Belton Willis and Aunt Linda. Mayo Perez, say hello to the three of us from Arizona.
Oh, wow. That's nice.
Yes. And a question from Yvonne Powell. Quality public education is so important. What role does elected school committees play in reclaiming excellence for all our children?
Yeah, you know, I've always thought that when when large groups of people can be involved in choosing who should make the decisions about our institutions, it's better than having those groups chosen by one person. I'm just a born again, democracy person, and so I was never, even though it was a democratically elected, though at large, school committee that got this school that was so conservative in the history of this city. It's still the opportunity to have people get elected to that who represented the communities was always more important than having one person appoint that committee. So I'm all for having the charter changed. It's going to have to get the approval of the state, but the charter changed to have an elected school committee again, in this city, right?
Thank you. I do want to, there was somebody raising a hand, and we did want to enable people to be speak their questions aloud if they choose. I do want to just remind everybody that we are recording this. So if you do want to raise your hand and speak, you can, but please keep in mind that this is being recorded and will be shared. So I wonder if our tech person wants to allow the person who raised their hand to be heard. So there's
quite a few.
Yeah, so let's see, how do I do that?
Eva, would you like
Eva?
to ask your question?
Thank you.
Eva?
I think Eva's on mute.
Eva, if you want to unmute, we can hear your question. While we're waiting to see how that works, I'm going to go back to a question from Fred Johnson, who asked, Byron, what's your view of Howard Zinn's American History, introduced to me 20 years ago?
I'm a big fan of Howard. It helps to be both a good historian, but also have a background in activism. And so I think that combination made him ask all the right questions and look at all the obvious omissions in traditional American history books. And I'm a big fan of that book, but I'm also looking for some of our historians to take up the next edition and go to the places that we know things about that he didn't have that information before him. Howard and I worked together a little bit, but my funniest story with Howard was that when I got my FBI report, there was a whole section of this on this demonstration that Howard and I had spoken to spoken at, and they had the actual leaflets in my for this. And I told Howard that, and he got all excited and he said, "Oh, good, give me a copy. I lost mine." So,
Thank you. I want to see if Eva wants to unmute now. It looks like she's there. Eva, would you like to ask your question?
I don't have a question. I don't know how I.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, we're happy that you're here, Eva. Thank you. It's nice to hear your voice.
Yes.
All right.
There is a question in the chat from Yvonne Powell. We could use that one.
Yep.
So, Mr. Rushing, quality oh, sorry. One more. We got to that one. There we go. You know UUM better than many of our listeners do. What advice would you suggest to our leadership as how we move better into UUM's mission and purpose? And that is coming from Vicki.
And just in case you haven't seen our new vision and mission statement, which was recently adopted by our board and approved by our delegates, Byron, the new vision of the urban ministry is we envision a greater Boston where all people live with freedom and dignity and have equitable access to resources and opportunity to shape the present and the future. And the mission is we work across race and place to dismantle racism and white supremacy culture and to advance racial, social, and economic justice. And so I just then wanted to say that, which is the context for Vicki's great question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that in any mission statements like this, and I know you're doing this, and that is to have those conversations about what can we do to accomplish that? What is the detailed work that we do to accomplish that? How much of that work is influencing how people vote? And so how much of that work is political, and how much of that work is making sure that the people who do vote in ways toward these ends end up with elected officials who carry out that work. And so that kind of what is really lobbying, we'll call it advocacy, so you won't lose you won't get in trouble with the IRS. The details, I think, is what, and it's not easy. This is hard work to come up with the details on how to accomplish these goals. But it's the details and making sure that everybody is invited to participate on a regular basis in making the decisions on how the organization and how the denomination works toward those ends. Some of you know, most of you probably on this call don't know, I was influenced by Unitarians and Universalists early in my life. When I was in high school, I went to a Universalist camp in the summer, and got introduced through them to the whole idea of liberal religion. They didn't stop me from being a Trinitarian, but everything else they taught me, I took to heart.
Thank you. Thank you so much. One of the questions here is from Yvonne. Quality public education is so important. What role does an elected school committee play in reclaiming excellence for all of our children?
You see, I think that one of the reasons why we want an elected, why it's such an advantage to have elected bodies and an elected school committee is that you have people that you can engage with, who you, of course, if they do not work toward improving the school system for everybody, you can then say, okay, you had your chance, and now I'm going to work with someone else be on the school committee. But one of the things about having elected anything is you are actually voting for yourself as well as them, because if you're talking about a serious democracy, that means a system where you engage the people that you voted for, so that it's not simply that you vote for them and they win and then it's their business, right? You vote for people who then you continue to engage with. And I do believe that as many of you, have really been surprised at how difficult it has been to improve the schools in the city of Boston. And we have a complicated history of public education in this city, but we have so many smart people, and it's just I'm really just continue to be surprised at how difficult it is to make the decisions to have this public education available to everybody in an equitable, to all children in an equitable way, which really means that because the school, any public education is of course not just about children. Public education is about families. It's about children and everybody who's concerned about those children. And part of it, I do believe that we should make all the bureaucrats, certainly for 2 years, it wouldn't hurt to just have them leave the headquarters and all teach. Just teach for 2 years, and then go back and see what kind of bureaucrat they want to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I see that Jen has her hand raised. I want to give her an opportunity to ask her question.
Thank you. Yeah, great. Hi, Byron. It's wonderful to always see you. Thank you. The past few years, we've gotten some wonderful Black historical writers. And because of that, now there's a backlash, especially in the southern states, against like 1619 Project and a lot of other writers. And do you hear that happening up here?
No, I haven't sensed the kind of resistance to telling a true history of the country, because that's of course what the resistance is. The resistance is not simply not talking about the history of Black people. The history is a resistance to talking about the true history of white people. And I haven't noticed that in the kind of opposition that we see in other parts of the country, and the growing ways in which that opposition is taking its shape. Texas textbooks, have always ignored Black people, and so that piece, the parts of this is not new. What is new is this growing outward overt resistance to telling this country's history, and I think that we have to call it out every time it happens. But on the other hand, we just have to make sure that as many people that we have influence over are reading and discussing and hearing the true history of the United States, the true history of Massachusetts and Boston, and on a regular basis.
So I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll just close with a couple of comments that people have offered. So I think our last question is going to be from Scott Kane, who said, thank you, Representative Rushing, for talking today. Recently, they put together a commission to study a change in the Massachusetts state flag. I understand you had filed legislation on this issue many times. I was wondering what your involvement with this has been in the past and any ideas on how this will play in the next few years.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's always a little weird when there's something you've been working on all this time, and then once you get out, it passes. So I'm not sure what that all means. But
planting a seed, right? You planted the seed.
But I think that it's really important. Symbols are really important, and of course we have to be careful always when we think symbols are just sort of they've always been this way, that we understand the history behind them. And in the Native American in the center of the Massachusetts seal, and therefore the Massachusetts flag, has all the history of that has always been raised by Native Americans in Massachusetts, and how derogatory it was, and how it came to be, and they were never listened to, and I had the opportunity in the legislature to be able to raise that among my colleagues, though it was the opposition to just thinking about it always surprised me. And then finally, we now have a commission to take a look at that history and let everybody know it, but also make recommendations on how it should be revised or just completely changed and a new symbol for the state corrected. So I'm looking forward to the ideas that come out of that commission, which of course has Native Americans represented on it.
Thank you. Thank you. So just a few closing comments. One from Claire Barker, who said, 53 years ago, I received a BA in history, and I've never heard a more cogent defense of why to study history. Thank you, Mr. Rushing. It's a privilege to hear your words.
You're very welcome.
Another one says, enjoying your views, values, and insight as always. Candelaria Tessio Collins.
Thank you, Candelaria.
And from Kristen Elton Willis, my dear Byron, it's Kristen. I grew up with activists from my uncle Leslie Harris and Henry Hampton, my parents Earlene and Bill, my other mother Sam Sad of HYCC, Uncle Mel, Barry, yourself, and John and Wendy. I held my mom's hand at the grassroots meetings, Shirley's presidential campaign, and the great achievements in the Roxbury and lower movements of the 70s. I have always listened closely and worshiped your knowledge of our local history. I wish I could remember all of it. If you have not already done so, will you please consider recording a history of Roxbury for us to share with future leaders?
It's an idea I will consider.
And maybe
thank you very much, and I really thank you for all the great work your family has done. Really.
And I think that's an appropriate closing comment. There are some others here. Thank you, everybody, for your questions and comments, and thank you so much, Byron Rushing, for sharing your time and your wisdom. When we read that long, and rich biographical profile, I'm always very proud to also say that you served on the board of the Urban Ministry. It is a source of pride to me and to our organization that we can claim you as one of our leaders in our organization and somebody who served the Urban Ministry. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, and thank you all who are on this webinar. I enjoyed myself. I hope you did too.
Yes, and one final comment, actually it's a question. Where can folks get in touch with you, Mr. Byron? Folks that like to reach out and have further conversation.
I can make you call Mary Margaret, but I won't do that. Feel free to email me, and it's very simple. Byron Rushing, one word, at Comcast.net. Feel free.
I'm gonna put that in, Byron Rushing at Comcast.net. And you can indeed, if you have a hard time, you can You can email me. I'll run it past Byron, but you can email. I'll filter. There you go.
Yes.
All right. Thank you again, Byron.
Thank you so much. It's an honor
Right.
to always sit and listen to you and all of your knowledge. So thank you for sharing so much with us.
Thank you all.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Have a good night.